I am so excited to be sitting here with an incredible family, Bayla and Chana Gopin. Chana is Mommy Gopin and child Gopin is Bayla Gopin. And we are here to talk about a form of divergence, of difference within a family that I think is so incredibly important, specifically for our community. And that is how families navigate learning disabilities. And I wanted to begin first and foremost by welcoming both of you. You might be our youngest guest in history, so this is a big deal. This is a big deal, and I'm really, really excited about this. But I wanted to begin the story by asking, when did you first realize that typical schooling, the standard, you're going to send your kid and you have the picture, we have a custom in our community. Before you go into any grade, you hold up the number of the grade you're going into, and you do that in first grade and second grade, and you're so excited, and you post it to Instagram or wherever you share those pictures on your family chat. And then at some point, the schooling system, which is designed for everyone, is not working for your everything, for your child. When did you first realize, when did you first notice that the school was not working for Bayla?
So since Bayla was pretty little, probably around 2 years old, when kids typically start sharing more, we kind of saw that she was a different type of a learner. She would get frustrated with certain things, but we saw from a young age that she was different than our older two children. She has two older sister and older brother. And this was our first experience, like, oh, wow, this is like a little bit different. And then as she was going through school, she was in kindergarten. We call it kindergarten, pre-1A, first grade. First grade was COVID. And, the school had told us, okay, we pull her out for extra reading help. We pull her out for some math. We're working with her. There's a push-in. We're supporting her. We see these things that are coming up, but there was no crazy red flags. And then in first grade, it was March 2020, and we had phone school. So not even Zoom school. She was listening on the phone, and I would sit with her because she wasn't at a place that she could navigate that on her own.
A 1 hour phone call is a lot for a first grader.
Correct. For any first grader, but especially a first grader that I knew, she had her morning teacher phone conference, she had her afternoon teacher phone conference, and she also had her reading class conference. So she was having a lot of phone calls at that time. And I would sit with her, and, she was very good at compensating for her lack of skills. So I would do homework with her, from the beginning of first grade in pre-1A, and she kind of fudged her way through it. And I would help her, and we just had to get through homework because homework was taking 45 minutes. So we just kind of pushed through. But now that I was sitting with her and I was really seeing where she was holding, it was very clear that reading, she couldn't even recognize a word. Most kids at the end of or middle of first grade
They're
have
doing sight reading.
Sight words, exactly. Even if they're not so great at the, phonetic
sounding out
exactly.
the words, they can recognize some of the key words, like
exactly. But
the whatever those sight words are.
100%. And I was noticing that she didn't even have that. So we were talking to the school. We looked into different options, and starting in May of 2020, so pretty quickly, we got a reading specialist. We started out on Zoom with her, and we were working pretty intensively, and she worked with that reading specialist, who was wonderful, from the end of first grade through fourth grade, through the summers, through everything.
Could we pause for a second now? Do you get a formal, I want to use the word, if that's okay, the D word, which is dyslexia?
Yes.
Did you get a formal diagnosis like, oh, your child is dyslexic?
So, yes, that happens a little bit later. So in the middle of fourth grade, between first grade and fourth grade, she got pulled out. She
Support, help.
Exactly. Math, reading, anything kind of language-based, writing. She was being pulled out. They had push-ins. And her school was trying to give her as much support as as they were able to. And she also had private reading specialists in Hebrew and English after school almost every day. And in the middle of 4th grade, the school kind of said, she's going to be in 5th grade next year and then in junior high, and things are kind of going to get harder. We'll keep giving her support, but this is what we have to offer. So my husband and I decided to look into our options of other programs to provide what our kid needed.
Well, just pause for a second there, because I want to hear from Bayla. Bayla, your mother is older than you, so her memory works differently because when you were in 1st grade, you were very, very little, but your mother can remember that. I'm curious for you, do you have a first memory or an early memory of when you realized that school was a little bit harder for you than other girls?
Like in 3rd grade, it wasn't getting harder. I just saw that everyone else in the class was reading a book, but I couldn't read it. And the teacher didn't tell me, okay, go read it. She just told me to sit there, and she didn't tell me to do anything. So I thought that the whole class was reading a book, and I thought that I didn't know how to read. I just couldn't do it.
How did that make you feel, that you're looking around and you're seeing everyone, even listening to you? My heart goes right away into remembering when I was your age. I had genuine, real math anxiety. I happened to be good at math, but I had terrible anxiety. I remember all the other kids. It was just it didn't frighten them. How did it make you feel when you were watching all of your friends kind of take to this very naturally, and you realize that this is this is really hard for me?
Everyone was just I felt that they're just normal kids, but I didn't know how to read, so I wasn't a normal kid.
So that's how you felt. And was that feeling embarrassing? Did you try to hide the fact that when you were in 3rd grade you did not know how to read?
So sometimes I actually guessed. When we were reading a reading sheet, I couldn't read it, so I said the word. I didn't try to actually read it. I just said whatever word popped into my head first. It wasn't that I had to think about it. I just said it.
You just said it, just hopefully. And how did you feel? Did your friends ever ask you? Was that a conversation you would have with other girls where they would ask, "Can you read?" or "Do you know how to read?" Was that a question that would you either try to avoid altogether or?
No, 'cause I think that some of my friends knew when I got older in 4th grade that they knew I couldn't read.
So they knew that was something that you shouldn't ask you about. And do you have memories? When I think of reading now, you think of reading a book, and you're okay, so you're not going to read so many books. It's not the end of the world. In what way does the difficulty of reading, how did that affect your day-to-day life?
Because when the whole class was reading a book, my teacher didn't she just said sit there. So I was sitting in the classroom for 8 hours not doing anything, and then at the end of the day I was why am I going to school if I'm not doing anything the whole day?
And when you would go home, in what other ways do you feel the difficulty of reading affected you? Did it affect you outside of school, or that felt regular again?
So let's say if I wanted to read a book when I was going to bed, I would ask my mother to read it. I couldn't read it myself. So maybe it affected me a little, but I didn't see that it affected me a lot.
Can I interject here?
Yeah, please.
Do you remember when Bubby was at our house for Shabbos and they were playing apples to apples? Do you remember that?
No.
So it affects being able to socialize typically.
Correct.
Meaning, okay, great, a game that doesn't require reading, that's fine. Okay, Mancala, you can play Mancala. That's fine.
Or soccer or
Okay,
kickball.
sports. Okay.
Correct.
But any game that requires any sort of reading or really any taking in of information, even if it's not like
a Monopoly.
based.
You need to know where you landed. You
yes.
need to know what the pieces are. So when you're socializing with other people who like board games is like a piece of cake,
right.
It's going to be much, much harder.
And you can process that information in a quick way so you can be competitive, like a game like Set or Spot It. That, okay, it's not words, but if it takes you a little bit of time to bring in the information, make sense of it, and then give your answer, the game's over already.
So I want to hear from you, Mommy Gopin, Chana. What is it like as a mom when you hear that? I think there is a very universal experience for all parents when you realize that your kid is not going to conform to our unrealistic visions of perfection. And when the first time that there's a little bit of like, you have to turn a little bit, the road kind of turns, it can be frightening, it can be scary. And I'm curious how you, as a parent, handled realizing that I have a child who is going to need significantly more support. I mean, first, let me just ask you, did you require support when you were younger?
I did not, nor did my husband, nor did my first two children. So, like you said, I have chills now because, reliving that first, you find out, okay, my kid can't read. Let's get support. The school is, on board. We'll help you, the typical school. And okay, you move along. You're putting in the time, you're putting in the effort, you're putting in the money. And it's just not connecting. And then, so that's like your first thing. Okay, we're gung-ho, we're going to help her. And then when it's not working and you realize we need more, and this is going to be a much bigger process. And it's not just the process, it's you have a kid, your kid who you have these hopes and these dreams and this vision of how
it's going to unfold.
Exactly. And there's a lot of crying and a lot of davening and a lot of questions.
What was your trigger what would get you emotional from this? I mean, it's I know for myself, and I try to avoid it, but it's very scary. There's this song by Hanan Ben Ari about Ameina HaYiladim, where he sings about, I don't want my children to struggle with the same things I struggled with. And sometimes when you see a child struggling, it calls back all of your own, making friends and all of the terror of being in elementary school, where you're just in a world that is kind of foreign. It's not your world that you created. But for you, you didn't really, it was almost the opposite. You didn't have experience with this. So, why wasn't it just the same, I don't know, I have a child who, I don't know, they need swim lessons or they need whatever. Why does it become so emotional, this issue?
I think there's, a few aspects. Reading is literally, a basic skill that a person needs to have in order to navigate life. And it's not to say that someone can't be a successful individual, right? You have all these, Fortune 500 CEOs who are dyslexic or have ADHD or have whatever learning disabilities. It's not that a child or your child that has a learning disability or dyslexia, you're not necessarily worried that they're not going to be a functional human in the world. It's just to watch your precious child struggle and fight and not see
any results.
Success, that is heartbreaking, because you can do and you can have reading specialists and you have that, but they're putting in 110% and getting out 2%. And you just don't want to see the light in your child's eyes dim, and you don't want to see them crumble under this pressure. And yeah, that's what it is. It's not about you. We're not embarrassed. You said the D word. It's not a bad word. It's a fact of life. It's 100% the way Hashem created her, and we see it so clearly, especially now that, she'll be doing her homework. She's in 6th grade. She'll be doing her homework next to my 1st grader, and to see my 1st grader opens up the page and she reads, and Bayla opens up the page and she reads after years of struggle, and they're reading the same thing, and this one flies through, and this one takes her time, knows the rules, uses the rules, and it's the same experience, but 2 totally different roads to get there.
Bayla, I would love to hear from you 2 things. A, when you hear your mother talk about how emotional this was, like how heavy it can be for a parent. You were a child. Does it surprise you? Did you know at the time that this was something very emotional for your parents?
No, because, myself, I didn't know that. I didn't know how to read. So, I thought that, every kid doesn't know how to read. It's just, a thing that, every kid just, can't read. But then when I got older, I also started to feel, a little, stressed out. I thought that, maybe, my friends wouldn't want to be friends with me anymore because I couldn't read.
My soul just shattered into 1,000 pieces, but your friends and that fear of losing friends, did that ever actually happen? Do you feel like you had friendships that fell apart because you weren't able to keep up with where they were academically?
So I had a lot of friends in school, but they wouldn't ever I would have to call them to have a play date. They wouldn't ever call me. That made me feel okay, they don't want to play with me. I would have to go to them. They wouldn't call me. They wouldn't come over to me in school and say hi. I would have to go to them.
And you were already aware of that at a fairly young age.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're at a fairly young age right now, so it was even younger than that. The other question that I had is relating to your siblings. What is it like? You're in a family, and I happen to know your uncle, who was always in my eyes like this academic achiever, straight as an arrow. Everything came naturally to. I don't know your father quite as well, or your mother. I'm meeting them for the first time. But what was it like with siblings, especially having younger siblings who were developing skills so easily and naturally that you were struggling with? Did you feel competitive with your siblings? Did it hurt your feelings? Was it embarrassing for you to have younger siblings? How did you navigate being in a family where the very thing that you struggle with seems to come so naturally to everyone else?
So, not so much this year, but last year, if my siblings asked me if I could read a book, my mother would say, no, I'll read it to you. I, felt that, there's, I don't know how to read, and it kind of affected me reading books to my siblings, me playing a board game with my siblings, me doing this with my siblings, me doing that with my siblings. Yeah.
Chana, were you careful in speaking to your children, particularly ones who are younger than Bayla? How does a mother make sure that the siblings are sensitive without kind of over enforcing or othering one of your children too much. Like you don't want that dynamic to happen either. You want everybody to feel like they're organically on the same page in the same family. So how do you talk to your other children about sensitivities towards what Bayla was struggling with?
Well, it's very important for everyone to realize that everyone has something, right? Whether it's academic, it's social, everyone has something that they need to improve on. So that's, if anybody wants to step out of line and make fun of anybody else, like, you better check yourself, because there's what to fire back at you. So I think that's just regular sibling dynamics. There's definitely been times when, if they're fighting and, well, you can't read that. But at this point, thank God, it's almost like a joke. Can I tell a little story?
Of course.
This is actually very funny. This happened this year in carpool coming to school. A grandparent of one of the children in the carpool was doing carpool, and she didn't know how to get to school. And Bayla was sitting in the front seat, and the GPS wasn't speaking. So the grandparent,
it was only the written directions.
It was only the written directions. And Bayla's the assistant driver in the front. This grandmother's driving the car, and she's like, Bayla, tell me what it says. And Bayla turns, she says, I can't read it. I have dyslexia. So at this point, it's Hashem creates people like this and like this and like this. Hashem created Bayla with dyslexia. It's part of who she is, and it's not bad. And it's not bad because with so much praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have a place. We have a place where she's able to come to terms with who she is as a person in the way that Hashem created her. So I just feel like in terms of that, we can almost joke about it now, because the same way this person snorts when they laugh, or the same way that this person sneezes really loudly, okay, she has dyslexia, and that's okay. It's okay.
That realization, do you think that took a little bit of work, or it came totally naturally?
That 100% took a lot of work, and it 100% came from Shalshelet, because, am I allowed to say that yet?
Please.
When you have a situation in life that you're stuck, you don't have options, you need something, and there's no way to get it, that's what do you do? I don't even know. And thank God I didn't have to not know what to do for my child in order to give them the tools to develop as a reader, as a person. We had an option, and we had the best option. It wasn't even just we're just going to send her somewhere and hopefully everything will be okay. We have a place that has given her 100%, 110%, 150%, everything that she needs to become a reader, to become a learner, and to grow as a human being.
So let's talk about the decision to send your kid to a different school. You're in Shalshelet, which is an incredible school that is focused specifically on students who are struggling with reading, decoding issues. Yeah. And we'll be speaking, hopefully, to some of the administrators just to understand what this is and how they provide services. But the decision to change schools, you come to a school, it's so hard getting used to the school that you're in, so hard starting any school. It's probably really, really difficult to switch schools. Do you remember the first time that your mother came to you and said, I think we're going to switch schools and this is why?
I actually do remember. It was Friday, and me, my mother, and my sister were sitting on the couch, and I heard my parents talking about okay, we have to try to switch schools, and so I think I asked my mother, I was oh blah blah blah, am I switching schools? And she's like, yeah, we have 2 schools, but we're not sure yet. And then I was like, I really don't want to switch. I started crying, and then I ran downstairs to my father. I was like, did you hear I'm switching schools? And he's like, yeah, I know. And I felt that, like, it was, like, stressful for me because I, like, didn't know anyone who was going there. Like, I thought that I wouldn't have friends who were going there. I thought I would lose all of my friends. But then, like, it just, like everyone was my friend, and everyone, like, wanted to be around me.
That's when you came to the school. But
Yeah.
that conversation, which I assume she's remembering correctly, was on a Friday.
100%. Well, I honestly, I don't even remember the details. I remember her. I said, yes, I think we're going to have to look into other things. And I remember her bursting out crying, which obviously made me burst out crying. And I remember her running to my husband saying, you know, what's going to happen? What's going to be? Tell me about it. You know, she was slightly terrified by the idea of leaving her community, leaving everything she's known for her whole life, leaving her sisters in the same school as her. It's such a huge, I mean, as an adult, it's like, okay, we'll
go to a different school.
you know, but as a kid, that's
Whole
their
world
whole-
is being replaced.
their whole life. They're in school. They have more waking hours in school than they do at home on a weekday. So to see that you know, that nervousness, that anxiousness, that just not knowing, that, like, going back to what we were saying before, the not knowing, you know, when we kind of were like, okay, we have to do something, but we don't know what, we don't know where, we don't know how, we don't know anything. That was kind of like the low point for me, where we knew that what we had wasn't working, but we didn't yet know what was going to be. And that was kind of really that low point, and the point where it was just like, okay, we, like, Hashem, just send us something, because
we need a way forward.
We need a way forward.
Exactly. Bayla, do you remember what your mother or father or anyone, how did you get comfortable with the idea of switching schools? Did it take for you to actually come to the school and see it? Or were there people or conversations that you had that helped you get comfortable with this idea of switching?
So, like, I knew that I wanted to learn how to read. Like, that was something that I wanted to learn how to do. So I, like, kind of, like, I didn't force myself, but I was like, okay, if I want to know how to read, I need, like, to go to a different school. Like, I can't stay in this school if I want to learn how to read.
And that motivated you ultimately to say, as hard as this is going to be, and the friends that I'm not going to be able to take with me to this school, I would rather learn how to read than stay comfortable around my friends.
Yeah.
And that was and so, you know, when you started crying initially, that was like how long did it take you to, like, get comfortable with it? Was it like a day later, a week later? Do you remember how long that process took?
Probably once I came to see Shalshelet, I realized that I want to stay here forever. Like, I thought, like, I didn't want to leave.
That was when we went initially
to check
in the
out
admissions
the school
process. Yeah, and as we were walking out, she was there for maybe an hour and a half, and she looked at me. And what did you say to me?
I want to come next year. I want to stay forever.
Those were her words.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, there's no greater reaction you could ever want from a child.
Correct.
Taking them to a first, okay, whether it's camp or school or daycare or a play date or, like, I want to stay forever. When you hear your kid say that, you're like,
okay.
Okay.
Sure.
But what do you attribute that to? Meaning, your kid is coming to a school, they're leaving their friends, and they're coming here to a school that's, like, for, like, special needs, for somebody who needs really help reading. And there must be a fear, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, and I just want to surface it, like, in our community, there's, like, always, aside from the fact that our community is very academic centric, It's how we think about so many of our social interactions and friendships are based on, what class are you in? Are you in the high honors, regular honors? What shear are you in? Which is probably more male centric, but that is the opening to any student in YU or in high school. You're in a TABC and a DRS and an MTA. These are all modern Orthodox schools. What cheer are you in, et cetera, et cetera. For you, was there a fear that this school is going to make normalcy an impossibility? Now we're going to a separate school where they're cordoned off, they're separate, that this is going to be almost an intellectual scarlet letter that my child now has to wear every single day? Were there fears about the fact that this is a separate school, not integrated within an existing school, that made it scarier, or is that a comfort? How did you relate to the fact that this is a school dedicated specifically to this? I could imagine as a parent is I don't want to be a member of any club that's just for, the kids who, you want to be with the cool kids. You want to be with the normal kids. You want to be with the Plan A kids.
I've spoken to many, many, many parents over the past 2-3 years who have been in similar situations. And something that I've seen repeatedly, I have people who will say to me, social, friends, the other, all these things that you're saying. And I say to them, well, what's it like for your child right now? What's it like for your child in this typical school where they're, everything Bayla just said, they're just sitting there. They're going out for every class. They're in their typical class for, 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there. What's their life? And that kind of is very eye-opening, because people are thinking, okay, if I just stay in this school and get the services, they'll help me, and all these things. You're missing the bigger picture here. If the kid isn't getting what they need, and if they're already other, and they're also not getting what they need, then what's the point? Then how are you any steps ahead of going to somewhere where they'll actually get what they need? They're already other. If your kid has a learning disability that is severe enough to kind of make them have to be out of the classroom more than they're in the classroom, they're already other. So what do you have to lose? So for me, yes, 100%. You have all these gnawing thoughts and all these feelings. But if you realize what you're able to give your child and what you're able to do versus what they're already going through, then it kind of is you take a deep breath and you're like, it makes sense. It makes sense because you already have that. You already have that lack of socialization, and you already have that otherness. And if you can send them to a school where they don't have to go out for anything.
Like a Shalshelet.
Exactly.
Which is designed
if you
specifically.
sell them to Shalshelet, because to us, this is the ultimate. There's no other here. Bayla can tell you exactly. She knows exactly how she feels about this. Nobody here is other, because everyone is other. Everyone here is learning in their own way. They're
Which is
celebrated.
really the case everywhere, but you see it here. And we'll get to here in a second, but I want to ask Bayla, we're up to the point where you're switching. Do you remember having to tell your friends what you told them? You had people who you knew and you grew up with in the school that you were in previously, and now you have to tell them that you're going to a different school. How did those conversations go, and how did you explain why you were switching?
So I told my really good friend at recess, and I was like I just felt okay, yeah, I'm switching schools. I knew a little bit why, but I didn't know so much why I was switching. I just thought, okay, I was switching because I don't know how to read. And my friends would always ask me, oh, why are you switching? I was like, because I don't know how to read. I thought it was cool because I didn't know how to read. Like I thought I was a normal kid. And I told my friend, and she's like, okay, we'll miss you so much. And like my neighbor, she always tells me, she's like, oh, I wish you were still in our school, because it would be so fun if we were on the same floor as each other. And I was like, yeah, I also like wish, but like sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. Like you can't just not push yourself to do something that you really want to do.
And tell me about the difference between the friends. Is there something special about the friends that you've made here? Meaning the fact that everyone has struggled with something very specific here. How does that affect the friendships that you've made here? Does that make it even easier to make friends? Do you feel like people understand you differently or better?
I just know that like no one is judging me because I don't know how to read, because we all don't know how to read. So it's not that like one friend is like, oh, it's so weird that you don't know how to read. Like they also don't know how to read. So like we're all here in the same issue together.
I just want to say, you happen to be remarkably well-spoken and incredibly mature. Like again, we don't have to make the decision now, but if you're looking to co-host a podcast, you may have a future. But when you look at yourself now, there's a word that you use, which is the word normal, and people want to feel normal. And normal is the kind of word that we use really to describe how we feel towards everybody else. Do you, at this point, when you think of yourself, you are a normal girl? Is that how you look at yourself?
Yeah, like when I was younger, I just thought like I didn't know how to read, so like I wasn't like a normal kid. But now I know how to read, so I'm like normal.
And you're no, there's something. What's remarkable to me is that you were normal the whole way through. You were always. Everybody is ultimately, has their one thing that kind of separates them out. But when you have friends now, do you have like two separate friend groups, or everyone kind of plays together? Do you have your Shalshelet friends and your and kind of your neighborhood friends from your old school? Do you keep them separate, or do you feel comfortable playing with everybody together?
I mean, like, we all, like, me and my neighbors live close, but, like, me and my friends don't. So, like, whenever, like, my friends come to my house, I'm always like, oh, okay, want you to meet my neighbor. And, like, I bring her to my neighbor's house. And, like, they're like I always talk about my friends, and they're like, oh, yeah, this is her. And I was like, yeah, like, they always look in the Jewish link, and they're like, oh, there's her. And I was like, yeah. Like, they all just, like, even though if my friends from this school don't know who they are, my friends from my other school do.
Chana, what advice would you give to parents who are just embarking on this? It's a long journey between when you first realize that your child needs extra support and getting to a place where you not only find the support, but you embrace it, and it is a source of great pride and achievement. We're like, wow, what advice would you give to parents who are just beginning on this journey, which can feel so frightening because you don't know what the end is necessarily?
Well, in life, we never know what the end is. So all we can do is what we can do. And just know you're not alone. There are parents here and parents all over the world who have kids who have all the ingredients that they need to be successful, and all they need is that extra little push and that extra help to be all they can be and really reach their potential. You're not alone. And even to parents who don't necessarily have kids with this specific struggle, you have a cousin, you have a niece, you have a nephew, you have an uncle, you have a neighbor. There is somebody in your life, even if it's not your own child, there's someone that you love in your life who has a language-based learning disability, probably many people in your life who have this type of learning disability that has gone undiagnosed. So you're talking about grandparents even. This isn't just an issue for the individual. This is really it's for everybody to think about and to care about. And I would just tell parents, you can call me. I'm happy to hear your story and share our journey as well. And honestly, I'm sure that you've been doing this for however long your child has been struggling, but don't stop. Don't stop doing everything that you can to help your child. Give them as much as you can with wherever you live, whatever your resources are. Don't stop, because it's the biggest gift that you could give your child, that extra little bit of help to help them reach their potential and come to Shalshelet.
We both grew up, I don't know exactly, but we're from the same generation, and we kind of were in the Wild West of it was like, it wasn't the Wild West, it was kind of just like more just like the free market of education in the 90s, of just get them through school. Is there anything or an experience or a conversation that helped you better understand? You did not struggle with any learning disabilities or language-based learning disabilities, to really understand the acuteness and severity of this struggle, to really understand beyond just looking at your own daughter. Is there somebody who helped you conceptualize what this struggle actually feels like? Like, why not take the 90s approach and just like push them through, get them enough help, and like they'll figure out a way to graduate them, and just get them out. And that way there's no scarlet letter, there's no difference, there's no school switching, there's no tears on the couch on a Friday. Just get them done, get them graduated.
So, I mean, in her earlier education, that was 100% my attitude. We just have to get her through school. Just get her through school. She'll be fine. We'll help her, but let's just get her through the system.
You'll write the book reports and the biographies and the science fair. Half the kids' parents are doing their science fairs anyways.
Exactly. So I definitely had that attitude before we had options. I have a master's in speech pathology and audiology, and I actually taught for a few years. I taught 7th and 8th graders. And I saw those kids. I saw the kids that whether they couldn't read or they had other language-based learning disabilities, and they were pushed through the system. And, for some reason, so many of them have this type of Bayla personality, the cute, the fun, the peppy, and they're adorable and they have friends, but you see that underlying space of just lack. Like, there's just this hole there that will never be filled because they're just pushed through. And that's not to say, that they won't be happy adults, but they're missing something so foundational and so fundamental. And I actually have had parents who have come over to me since Bayla's been in Shalshelet, who have said, my daughter is working now, and these issues had never been addressed properly, and she's really struggling. She's struggling to be good at whatever her job is. I don't remember what it was. And nobody wants that for their child. Nobody wants to just get through it, right? That's kind of like your last resort. I don't even remember what the original question was, but that's what I have to say about that.
No, why you're not just pushing through, which was, right. I mean, I was probably pushed through. I probably would have been, taken aside, medicated support, all this stuff, and I was pushed through. My issue wasn't language-based learning disabilities, but you just got them through. Get them on the conveyor belt. Get them out of there. I want to hear from Bayla, because there's no question that there are parents and also other young girls and boys who are struggling in their reading, and they've probably maybe just been told, or they're going to be told, that they have dyslexia. And that's very scary to hear that for some kids. And it could be scary where they want to know, what are my friendships going to be like? What is my future going to be like? Am I ever going to be able to learn how to read? What would you tell a young boy or girl? What would you tell almost like your younger self about this journey that you've been on?
That it is scary at first, but then once you know that you have the help that like you want to have, then like everything changes. You know how to read, you know how to do math, you know how to do grammar, you know how to do everything that you wanted to do.
And what is reading like for you now?
It's much better. I could sit on the couch and do my homework by myself. I don't need my mother to read me the directions. Like, I sit in my bed before I go to bed for 15 minutes reading a whole book by myself. My mother doesn't have to, like, tell me, oh, go do your homework now. I just sit on the couch and do it by myself.
Do you remember a certain teacher or lesson that helped you unlock or, like, where reading clicked for you? Like, do you remember the moment where you're like, I think I'm getting this?
It was just that, like, they were teaching me in a different way. Like, I couldn't understand what my teachers were telling me last year because I didn't actually do the work. But now this year, there's no excuse. You can't just say, oh, I don't know how to read, I can't do it. They just say, well, you do know how to read, so you could do it. Like, they just don't, they, like, tell you that they're, like, encouraging you to, like, do it instead of not doing it.
And what would you tell other young girls or boys who are nervous about their friendships, or maybe they're embarrassed because they don't want to let other people know that they can't read because they're afraid they're going to get judged by their friends, and they're afraid that they're not going to be able to have, friendships and this and that? What would you tell a young girl or boy like that?
That it's really not scary. It just might be scary because you think that, like, oh, I'm leaving all of my friends. You're still going to see them on the street. You could still, like, call them. And it's just the thing that changes is that you're not going to school with, like, your siblings or your friends, but you still are going to have those friendships that you think you're not going to have.
And Chana, listening to Bayla, I mean, it's remarkable. I'm just meeting her today, but, like, what feelings is it like being, thank God, she's still young, she's still very much a child, but listening to her speak and reflecting on the progress that she has made and all the work that Shalshelet, and thinking of all of the friendships and the uncertainty, what do you feel when you're, like, just listening to her independently, like, just kind of process, describe, discuss where she is right now?
I mean, I'm just thankful to Hashem, and I'm thankful to Shalshelet, and I'm so appreciative of the relationship that Bayla and I have with each other. This is not the first time that I'm hearing these things. We talk all the time because there is so much change, and there are so many new things that come up. So I'm very proud of her for sticking it out, putting in the effort, working hard. And our family is a great team. And you were asking us before about siblings. Like, Bayla has 6 other siblings, and thank God, father and mother, and we are, like, her biggest cheerleaders. She tells us about all of her friends and all of her teachers, and my kids talk about her friends and teachers like they're part of Shalshelet. So it's funny that, kind of, we were saying that this is the other, but my kids all wish that they could come to Shalshelet because they see what it looks like when an individual child gets exactly what that individual child needs. And our regular day schools they're doing a great job. They're doing a great job of educating my other children, and I'm so appreciative to them for that. But you can see what it looks like to have your child so seen and so known and so understood, and then given exactly what they need. Educationally, socially, emotionally, psychologically. There's no area of a child that is ignored or overlooked in Shalshelet. Your whole child is growing and developing and learning just right for them.
Let me ask you, your mother is obviously incredibly proud of you. Did you ever question whether or not she was very proud of you, or were you ever worried that you were disappointing to her?
No. I just knew that she was proud of me.
How'd you know?
Because you told me.
It's really a remarkable story, and to see a mother and their child, to see Bayla and Chana really as a team and supporting one another, and more than your story, but the people who are listening, because it is scary for parents, and it can be really scary for children too, to get the very help that you need and to be self-actualized. But the way that you share your story with such maturity and thoughtfulness, I'm so grateful for you taking the time to speak today. I always wrap up my interviews with more like rapid fire, like quick questions. So these are going to be quick ones. My question for you, Bayla, is, you obviously struggled a lot with reading. Do you now have a favorite book?
What types of books do you like to read?
I like reading comic books.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of comic books?
Like The Babysitter Club, like books like that.
That's a throwback, right?
Also, because
Big time.
I think that if you see the picture, you could picture what's happening.
And it makes it
mind.
much easier to
because you could, let's say if there's a girl with the book, you could understand that she's reading the book. She's not they're in regular books, they're not explaining to you that she's holding a book.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's so special. Chana, were there any books that were particularly helpful in allowing you and helping you understand the needs of your child, Bayla?
No books, but Mrs. Roth is like our go-to person because she is so incredibly knowledgeable about all aspects of language-based learning disabilities. And now that Bayla is in Shalshelet, she knows my child like she knows her own children, and she's my guru, she's my go-to. So any questions, any thoughts, she's my go-to person, as well as her classroom teachers. They just I don't know how, but they just know everything, and they know my kids. So that's where I get my best information from.
Bayla, my next question, there are only 3 rapid fire questions, so don't get worried.
No, we want more. This is fun.
My next question is, if somebody gave you as much time and resources, whatever you needed, for you to write your own book, what do you think you would write a book about?
These are tough questions. What would you want to write a book about?
I don't know.
Would you want to write a book?
No.
Not right now. If you were to go back to school, Chana, and you said you have a master's in speech therapy and audiology, but if you were to go back to school for as long as you needed to get a PhD, what do you think the subject and title of your dissertation would be? What would you want to study?
Ooh. How to sit on a beach and eat ice cream. Is that an option? No, I always say that, if someone would pay me and I could get a salary just to go to school and accrue degrees, I would love to do that.
What would you study?
Oh man.
That is our very question. Someone is giving you a great deal of money.
Yeah, a great deal of money. Take it and run. Definitely not like engineering or math.
Okay.
That
so
is
we've
off
narrowed
the table.
it down.
Maybe like interior design.
Okay, sure.
Could that be an answer?
I don't
you
know
get
if there are PhDs in interior design, but sure. My final question, I'm always curious about people's sleep schedules. What time do you go to sleep at night, and what time do you wake up in the morning?
Mrs. Roth, don't listen.
I go to bed at like 9:45 and I wake up at 6:45.
Me. Usually, even when I want to go to sleep early, I end up going to sleep around 11:30, and I wake up whenever my 3-year-old says, "Ima, come get me." So that's usually somewhere in like the between 6 and 7 range.
Chana and Bayla, I am so grateful for you both taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shulamit Roth, it is such a privilege and pleasure to be sitting with you, to be talking about the work of Shalshelet. And I before we get to kind of the work of the school, I wanted to talk about the experience for a child and for a family of dealing with learning disabilities. You know, it's not the most, I don't know if the right word is like glamorous struggle that kids have, but it is extraordinarily common and can really pull the rug out from a child's self-esteem. And for a lot of parents, I could understand why for some parents it may not escalate in the severity that like we need to get a special school for this child. We need to really like, come on now, like just pull them out, put them in the trailers and wherever is in the back of the school in the resource room, and we'll get them up to speed. Explain a little bit about what a language learning disability is about. How does that affect the child, and how does that affect the child? What exactly is the underlying issue that your school and work is meant to address?
So, first of all, thank you for having me. A language-based learning disability is different in a way a child processes language. So that can look like difficulty learning to read and sound letter correspondence. That can be difficulty learning how to write. That can be telling stories in a very roundabout way. That can be struggles following directions in a classroom, learning new vocabulary and pulling that out of your brain to be able to share what you know in an effective way.
Do we understand why some children have this? Is it a visual issue? Is it a brain processing issue? How much information do we have about the cause of why some children struggle with this form of learning disability?
There's a tremendous amount of research out there about how children with language learning disabilities learn in terms of different parts of their brain that are developing in a different kind of way, or what parts of their brain need a little bit more support. So we do have a lot of information, actually, but you know the saying of "Chanoch lanar al pi darko" is not from nothing. Like, no two children are the same.
Let me just translate "Chanoch lanar al pi darko," which is a verse in Mishlei, Proverbs, which says you have to teach a child according to their way. So, in terms of the research, has it like kind of like isolated, like where in the brain, what exactly is?
Yeah, so there are definitely different areas in the brain that are impacted, but we look at it from like a multitude of different ways. When we use the term language-based learning disability, it's an umbrella term. So no two children who have a language-based learning disability are exactly the same, and the different areas of language that they may struggle with, or the different parts of their cognition that may be impacted. For example, certain children might struggle more with like recalling certain or pulling information out of their memory. Another child may struggle more with their processing speed and how quickly they can process information. Other children may have far more difficulty specifically in the language realm in terms of how they organize vocabulary terms and being able to use them effectively, or their grammar. So really kind of looking at and understanding where specifically an area of weakness lies, or where a struggle lies, and being able to provide supports in those areas is really, really important. But all of those kind of fall under the umbrella of a language-based learning disability.
Tell me a little bit about the effect that this has on a child's psychological development, and what you see are common issues, mistakes, or themes that come up for parents who, not every, you don't come with a label of what your struggle is, but how parents, the struggles of parents being able to identify and understand the severity of the learning issue that they have.
So I think that there are impacts to children in more than just an academic realm when they struggle with a learning disability. And that could be that they were already vulnerable to those challenges, or that they are kind of developed along the way as they constantly feel, othered or stigmatized, or they're told, you're so smart, you could do it, but they're watching, their peers kind of run circles around them academically. And sometimes what you end up seeing in a classroom is less about the learning struggle and more, sometimes, not to be stereotypical, but girls will be a little bit quieter and just kind of melt into the backgrounds of a classroom. And a boy might become a little bit sillier in a classroom, or more, quote unquote, I don't like this term, but they'll use a term, behavioral. Anytime a child reacts behaviorally, they're telling you something is not going right for them, or there's a skill they haven't acquired yet that we're expecting of them. So that's usually what you'll see, but there's always an impact that when a child can't do something that their peers can do, or that you're asking of them, that they start to feel, negatively about themselves. And sometimes parents will ask, how do I know when is or I'll have neuropsychologists call and say, I'm trying to make a recommendation for, XYZ kid. How do I know when to tell them to make that shift, like you said, either to go to a specialized school or to have more resources provided in schools. And our local day schools do a phenomenal job at trying to really provide those in-house supports through pull-out groups, through push-in, with support teachers. Sometimes the magic sauce is a little bit of out-of-school help, and so how do you know? So one thing that you touched upon is really severity, right? If there's a huge spectrum of learning challenges, and a child can struggle some and a child can struggle a ton. So that's one way to know, is if a child is really, from a benchmark perspective or developmental perspective, really very far behind their peers. That's one way that you know. But another way to know is that if your child is really feeling it and starting to lose their sense of self as a learner, one of the most amazing things about children who are neurodivergent in some way, so dyslexia or comorbidity of ADHD, they're incredibly creative. They're incredibly talented in so many ways. We have some students here who, they're rocket ships on the ice, that's their thing. Or they're going to be engineers one day, and they come up with incredible creations in STEM. But sometimes when you're just struggling all day long, you forget about all the parts of you that are really, really strong, and you just start to lose your sense of self. And I think that's the other way we know, so a lot of our students, we don't have any pullout at Shalshelet. You're never pulled out of your classroom. You don't have, 7 kids learning in one reading group in the classroom, and you're the one who gets pulled out. Everyone just gets what they need, because our students are so sensitive to the fact that they were always
the ones being pulled out.
They're always out, and it's such a clear, even if you tell a kid you're so smart, you're not different, they're smart. They feel it. The hard part is that, in contrast, and you kind of touched upon this in an earlier question, in contrast to other learning I shouldn't say learning differences, let's say disabilities, right? That are very visible. Mm-hmm. This is very invisible.
Yes.
And it can go so easily missed or chalked up to something else, or therefore you can just say, like, it's fine, we'll keep them with everyone else because they look the same. Parents often come and they'll say, I was recommended to come, but I don't get it. Like, my kid's so verbal. My kid talks so much. How can it be they have a language-based learning disability? I always say, like, our students here, they're not the ones that are playing on a playground that you're like, oh, I can tell. That's the kid who struggles in a class. You'd have no idea, right? I know you just met with a student here, Bayla. Like, you wouldn't be able to pick her out of a crowd and say, that's the kid who's having a hard time in the class. But, when she came here, she was talking about experiences that all day long she just sat and was kind of like a wallflower, and then she would go home after being exhausted from trying and feeling like a wallflower, and then have to learn for something that's really, really hard for her. I mean, I think the other piece of it, again, and it's not for everybody, it's that you have to. We're not looking to say, okay, you know what, we're going to hop up all the kids who are struggling. Like, there's really a spectrum, and sometimes really services and an inclusion program, it can be a magical experience for a child and transformative. For the kids for whom need something that the pacing is different, it's more intensive, it's throughout your day, you need more language support. It's going to take them a little bit longer to develop that automaticity. It's not just going to be a year. Those are the kids who need to come, because also after school, they deserve to be kids, and they deserve to, like, play and join a soccer team and not have to have reading tutoring. That's never something that we recommend to somebody. Like, if you're in a just right reading group, then you shouldn't have after school tutoring. So those are some of the things that I think are the tipping point when you look at how to help a family figure out and navigate what's right. A kid here is not keeping pace with the rest of their fourth grade classroom. They're keeping pace with themselves.
One thing that I would love to hear from you about, from your vantage point particularly, is that what makes this school unique is not just that you are focused on language-based learning disabilities, but you are also very focused on, you have a Jewish population. There's a Jewish component in here. And I was thinking about the Jewish community and why I think for our community, why kind of sometimes dealing with language-based, specifically learning disabilities, is kind of so difficult. Like, I was thinking, like, oh man, like, they literally call us the people of the book. So, like, not being able to read can be so difficult. But there's also larger factors about kind of the emphasis on academics, the emphasis on being not just fluent in reading, but being fluent in reading in two different languages. We want our children to be able to read both, English and textbooks and learn, but we also want them to be able to open up a prayer book, a siddur, and be able to daven, be able to, learn Torah and read Torah. What have you seen from your vantage point of, like, the Jewish factor, that this is not just a school for language learning disabilities, but it's specifically for Jewish students who are struggling with this? How do you factor in the social context of coming from Jewish families and Jewish communities and the specific needs of the Jewish community as it relates to this? Like, do you have parents who are already nervous about, like, what is this going to mean for shidduchim? For, like I know that sounds fully crazy, but, like, we could sometimes be a little bit neurotic about our own future. Shidduchim meaning, like, is it going to affect marriage prospects and this and that? We can get so scared when there is a deviation from the norm with our own kids, specifically in the Jewish community. So I'm curious, from where you sit, how has the context, the social and cultural context of our community kind of affected the direction of the school?
That's a really good question. I mean, we specifically opened for that reason, right?
Correct.
Like, so it's completely affected the direction of the school in its totality. I won't say that we've discussed shidduchim with anybody yet, although I can see already, like, what is more close at reach, for our students is, like, where they'll end up in yeshiva for the year, right? Which also impacts, seminary, exactly. We're going to a Beis Yaakov high school or not a Beis Yaakov high school, having come from Beis Yaakov here, and, like, how do you reintegrate into that? Which obviously ultimately relates to, bringing up the shidduchim piece. But I think the whole driving force behind starting Shalshelet really was to be able to provide a place where parents didn't actually have to choose between, like, a path of Yiddishkeit for their children or, really robust, supportive education that is totally necessary to help their children thrive. Within the context, again, of our community and giving kids the opportunity to daven in a minyan every day and just have that experience, right? Even if you can't keep up with all the texts all the time, right? Like, so instead of leaving the minyan because, like, I'm so bored here, we have a minyan that caters to them. And also the focus sometimes is teaching them, like, how do we sit in a minyan and what comes next and what can I anticipate, so that I can feel a part of this community, so that when they do get to high school and yeshiva and beyond, like, that is not, they're not a fish out of water. We focus a lot on giving them, textual skills in terms of the actual reading, but also what I refer to as more of a cultural literacy component, where I focus a lot on using terminology that they'll hear and know and be able to use in their common language. Like, you should know what a mitzvah is, and you should know how it's different from a halacha, and you should know how that is different from a minhag, and you shouldn't be scared of those words when you see them, or scared of a Hebrew text. I think it's a huge piece of it is that, it may be hard for you to read, but you should never be scared of trying. And I think when, I listened to one of the stories that Bayla said to you about how she just sat there and wasn't expected to read like everyone else, like, no, I'm never going to take that away from you. We're going to meet you where you're at, and we're going to help you build that skill. But it's important. It's important for you to learn how to do that. And so I think there are pieces where we're always trying to think experientially. How do we continue to give our kids who aren't going to their more traditional, general education school, because it just wasn't the right fit, but the way we think about those experiences and how to help kids integrate and feel successful in those experiences, whether it be from an academic perspective or, more of just an experiential perspective, they have what it takes to feel like they're still part of the community and give back to the community, as opposed to, there was no option for me in my community. So either I was like kind of warehoused in my school and pushed through a system that didn't work for me, and I could stay religious or not, or I had to be sent out, which is not,
where you need so much more commitment and drive to keep that connection to Yiddishkeit.
Yeah, for sure.
One question, and this is undoubtedly a very sensitive question, but I feel like it needs to be asked. There's no question that part of the magic of Shalshelet and the school that you've created to address students struggling with language-based learning disabilities is that you have a very low teacher-student ratio, I'm sure. It's not 25 kids in a classroom or 30 kids in a classroom. It's very small. You probably have like what's the ratio here? Do you know?
About 2 to 1.
2 to 1 ratio. And in order to provide services at this level in a religious context, it is very expensive. And this is an issue. Both of these issues are near and dear to my heart and things that we've spoken about on 1840. The first issue is making sure that Jewish education and the Jewish community remains open and accessible for all Jews who want that connection. And then secondly, and it's like this is like the impossible paradox, secondly is I feel like it's almost like morally unjust to, go to a patient and say, we have a cure, but we need you to build your own hospital. We need you to... all the reason, like not everybody has that capacity. I don't need you to share the exact amount of the tuition, but I am sure that it is expensive, much more than the already very expensive tuition for private yeshiva education. How do you work with families? How do you navigate this issue? The sticker price can be so jarring and just feel like, like it's not an answer. If it's going to, bankrupt a family, if I'm going to have to sell our house and move to a different place when we're already dealing with all this uncertainty, then that's not really an answer. So how do you approach the issue of finances, which undoubtedly needs to be more in order to provide the support that you do? How do you address this with the families that are considering Shalshelet? And obviously this is an issue with all kind of tailor-made schools. It's not just a Shalshelet issue, but how do you approach that?
Yeah. So I will say, I know firsthand, it's not a Jewish, problem versus non-Jewish problem. All private schools that are specialized, to cater to a specific type of population in the special education world are similar in tuition. So we kind of fit that same mold. And there are a few pieces, honestly, because nobody's looking to make somebody, not have money to eat in order to send their kid to a special education school and get them what they need. And it is important to us that Shalshelet is accessible to everybody. There are a few different things that we do. Obviously, we work with every family, case by case, how they're, there's a finance committee that works with them. And there are ways in which,
Do you sit on the finance committee?
I do not.
Deliberately not.
I
you don't know
I do education.
So you don't know which kids are which.
I do not. I'm not involved at all in that part.
Mm-hmm.
So, they do work with families. I think like every school, there's, there could potentially be financial aid should a family really need it. We also obviously, there in the same way that any Jewish day school really relies on the community to help support it, because there are people who can and cannot afford tuition. It is incredibly important to have an institution like Shalshelet be something that is supported by the community at large, whether you are personally impacted by the need for Shalshelet or not. You don't want to not have it, right? So just to draw an analogy, you mentioned the hospital, you have a cure, right? Like even if you don't need that cure, you don't want that hospital to not happen, to not be there, or to the cure to not be there should you ever need it one day. And so people get behind lots of different organizations that are exceptionally meaningful because they're important for us to have as a community. And Shalshelet is no different in that way. These kids have so much to give back to our community and deserve a place in our community. It felt so, before Shalshelet opened, there were very few options for people in our community who were really struggling in this way. I personally, I have a brother who is dyslexic and who has ADHD, and I lived through it with my family, right? Figuring out what was the right place for him to go. He had nothing. It was years ago. And everybody had the best of intentions, but poor kid was put through the ringer at school because there wasn't an option for him. And so it's incredibly important that we, support these kids so that they can remain a part of our community, that they can give back to our community. It's what we're all about, right? It's what we're all about. People are always looking for you. We don't have a community without a kosher supermarket, without a hospital and Jewish doctors who can help take care of us, right? They're everywhere. We don't have it without a mikvah. This is no different. We need it. It's a necessity. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity. But, and then there are families who have explored public education and it didn't work for them, and they too need something more specialized. And at times there could be ways for them to be placed here.
Sure.
That could also be helpful. But so we work with every family, and depending on need.
And the fact that it is a communal endeavor, this is not for their kids for this, but as a community, we need to make sure that we have the institutions and mechanisms that allow everybody to have a childhood that was for them. We can't say that, being Jewish, we can only have a supportive childhood for, the athletic kids or for the olive shear kids, the super smart kids. And having an institution like this is what really transforms and allows everybody to say, I am part of a community where Yiddishkeit is for everyone.
I think if our expectation or hope is that kids are going to want to be a part of this community, you have to provide them the mechanism to be a part of the community. And without, we've come such a long way. We've come such a long way. But I think we have so many more steps to take moving forward in understanding how we can best how we can best service these kids, like open up our minds and open up our hearts. I think we've gotten, you put a focus a lot on academics, but sometimes in those academics we can be so rigid in figuring out like, how do we connect a kid to Torah? How do we connect a kid I had a kid who was having a hard time reading from a sitter, and I said, like, while we're working on it, you also daven talking to Hashem. Like, that's also okay. How many teachers take you aside and tell you that? But like, it was an important discussion. Or like I personally teach Judaic studies class, and I'm teaching Haggadah to, a middle school class. And I had a student come up to me yesterday and say, we're writing so much, I can't focus on what you're teaching, and I feel like I'm not going to know what to say. So I slowed down. But like, how many, I know for certain this student never said that in her old school. And she was lost in a class of 30 girls and just felt lost all the time. It was like a very proud moment for me that she came, and I actually felt comfortable, and I said, like, look at the self-advocacy skills that you have. You were able to articulate specifically what was happening for you and let me know in such a mature and respectful way, like, what I needed to do to help you. That's the other piece, is that, like, everybody has strengths and weaknesses, right? But like, to learn how to recognize what your strengths and weaknesses are and navigate them with such grace and like acceptance, that's what makes these kids the most successful, right? Like, yes, we want to teach you how to read, and yes, we want to teach you how to write, but like, more important than that, we want to teach you how to like live comfortably in your skin and use your strengths to just shine. And also, like, learning disabilities don't go away. So learn how to navigate life with it. Like, develop your little toolkit and power forward,
I always end my interviews with more rapid-fire questions, and I'm just so moved by the work that is happening in Shalshelet, and even more broadly, anyone who is linking arms, trying to expand the circle of who Yiddishkeit is for, that we could keep on stretching that circle until we get to that final, redemptive vision of a Yiddishkeit that is for all Jews, that they have a place and a path. I'm just very moved by your work, and I'm so grateful. If you'll allow, I always end my interview with more rapid-fire questions. I am curious. I'm sure there are a lot of parents who, they're trying to navigate this. They don't know where on the spectrum their child may be. Are there any books that are designed for parents to help them navigate, explore, better understand the issues related to language-based learning disabilities in general? Do you ever give recommendations to parents just to help them navigate and really understand their children better?
I'd have to think a little bit more deeply than rapid fire for some of the other recommendations, but the one that pops to the top of my head is Overcoming Dyslexia by Dr. Sally Shaywitz. She's like the...
Sally Shaywitz?
Yeah.
Overcoming Dyslexia.
Is one
fantastic. All we need is one recommendation. That's great.
It's dense, so...
Okay.
Be prepared.
Be prepared. My next question, if somebody gave you a great deal of money and allowed you to go back to school to study something else entirely, get a PhD in a subject of your choice, what do you think the subject and title of your study would be?
I wouldn't change paths. It wouldn't be like something else of my choice.
What would you do if you went back to school?
I think about it all the time. I need a lot of time and a lot of money. But if I had that,
yes,
I would definitely go back for my doctorate in education.
And study specifically.
I think I would want to study something between like classroom differentiation. I think that is the greatest art that any teacher.
Former 1840 guest Alana Natel-Turetsky, I believe, has her PhD in differentiated instruction.
She does, actually.
Former 1840 guest,
she
right
does
there.
Have her, yeah. Yes.
Shout out to Alana Turetsky.
Yes, I had a wonderful time speaking to her before we opened Shalshelet. She is like a wealth of knowledge.
So you would go in there.
So, yeah, definitely would want to...
differentiated instruction.
Differentiated instruction. The other piece is like I'm also always curious to. I don't know that people have ever really fully done a research study into the impact of like being pulled out of a classroom, like the social emotional effects.
Wow.
Of being pulled out of a classroom on children, and
that would
that I'm really curious.
That's
to
a
do
very
research on.
important. I hope that research is done, and that is a very brilliant topic. My final question: I'm always curious about people's sleep schedules. What time do you go to sleep at night, and what time do you wake up in the morning?
It varies. I go to sleep pretty early. Probably by 10, I'm in bed. And my husband's alarm goes off at 5 a.m.
Dear God.
He gives Dafyomi every day, so he wakes up at 5, and that is when I wake up. An ungodly hour. I don't get out of bed at that time, but I'm up.
My goodness, Shulamit Roth, thank you so much for speaking with us today, and Yasher Koach, thank you for your incredible work on behalf of the entire Jewish community.
Thank you for having me. You too.